Welcome to a journey of transformation. Every week, we explore new horizons, pushing boundaries and embracing what's next. This isn't just about technology, it's about evolving ourselves. Think of it as your weekly reset, a chance to upgrade your mindset, your skills, and your potential. We're here to help you rethink how you approach challenges, how you innovate, and ultimately, how you succeed. From powerful insights to practical strategies and game-changing knowledge, we tap into everything you need. It's about staying ahead, not just in a digital world, but in life itself, equipping you for every new beginning. Because in this fast-paced era, standing still is simply not an option. Growth is continuous. You either choose to evolve, to adapt, and to learn, or you risk being left behind. Embrace the change. This isn't just an update. It's a profound rebirth, a chance to redefine your future, to step into your power, and to truly thrive. It's about unlocking your next level. Join us on this exciting path. Embrace your new beginning. Your journey starts now.
Welcome to the Final Boss Podcast, man. Listen, I owe you guys a show. Look, I've been on travel, right? So I've been on travel and I was and wherever I go, the show goes. So last night I arrived to my destination and when I got here, I set up the equipment and everything, and I was like, you know what? It's go time, baby. It's go time. But because equipment would do what equipment does, it was a no-show, right? My computer decided, you know what? We want to do some critical updates at this very moment. So it was no show tonight, but I am here. Listen, this is the Final Boss Podcast, episode number 275, man. Tech Tuesdays. I'm solo tonight, right? Because the Sensei, shout out to Big Mike, man. The Sensei, he is doing a almost 7,000-mile trip around America, right? For the benefit of veterans, right? For veterans. But here's the thing. It's for suicide prevention, right? It's for suicide prevention, man. Shout out to Big Mike, the Sensei. He's out there doing his thing, man, doing a 7,000-mile trip around America for suicide prevention for veterans, man. So look, I'm here and I'm solo, but we gonna get into tonight's show, man. But before we do it, we have to get into the admin notes, right? But before we get to the admin notes, this is a greeting of the day. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is the greeting of the day. And as always, man, this is for entertainment purposes only, right? Entertainment purposes only. So the setup is a little different. I don't have all my equipment, but I do have what I have, right? But I am here, right? Just as I said I would be, right? So if you haven't already, go get Go Time All Aboard the Fired Up Train. Go get Go Time All Aboard the Fired Up Train. Go Time 2 is releasing this week, this Friday. Go Time 2 will be here. So just put that information out there. If you haven't got the book, man, look at the link, man. Click on the link and go grab the book, man. It's the first of the series of 3, right? Second book drops this Friday, right? So look, let's get ready to get rid of the banners. The banners are out of here. So we have the banners that are out of here, man. And I'm super excited, man. I hope you guys are excited. I'm excited. I know you're excited, right? Because it's Tech Tuesdays. Tech Tuesdays. So, also, admin note. If you haven't go get or haven't seen any of our previous episodes, you can go to our website, man, at at thefinalbosspodcast.com. At thefinalbosspodcast.com. Go see all of our episodes, right? Go check it out. www.thefinalbosspodcast.com, right? And if you're trying to get on the town hall, shoot us an email at info@thefinalbosspodcast.com. info@thefinalbosspodcast.com. I don't have my magic wand tonight, but I have something, and it's going to have to do, right? I have this little doohickey thing, right? It's going to have to do. So, admin notes. Everything's in order. All right, let's go. Let's see who's in here, man. We got a few people in here, a few new faces. So a lot of people are like, wait a minute, this is Tech Tuesday, but it's on a Wednesday. I just explained that I didn't have the capabilities of completing the show after I got to my destination because my device wanted to do a critical update, man. But now we're here, but look, now we're set up. We're not going to have any issues with Merger Wednesdays, right? We're not going to have any issues with Merger Wednesdays. So Merger Wednesdays will drop tonight, right? As it's supposed to. If anybody's in the chat, man, let me know if you can hear me, right? I just want to make sure you guys can hear me before I go ahead and do this whole segment. Let me know. Where you at? Can you hear me? Test. Let me know. Let's see. And folks who are watching from Instagram, drop in the chat, man. Can you guys hear me? Hold on. Give that a few minutes before we get into tonight's show, right? Can you hear me? Test. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I don't want to do the whole segment and you guys can't hear me, man. Somebody let me know if you can hear me in the chat, right? Let me know. Let me know. Oh, you know what? I could do this real easily. I didn't think about this, but let's see. Oh, you can't hear me. Let's get into tonight's show, baby. We are rocking and rolling. I'm super excited, man. That just gave me the information I need, right? That just gave me the information I need. So, all right, let's think about it. So we're on season 4, the Rebirth, arc 5, the Declaration. And tonight's episode is episode 275, right? 275. We're going to be talking about something about the machine that doesn't wait, right? The machine that doesn't wait. So let's get into it, man. Let's get into it, right? Let's get into it. So the machine doesn't wait for a committee. The machine doesn't wait for a committee. It waits for a decision, right? And that's the only vote that counts, right? Think about this. Somewhere right now, there's a system making a call that would take your organization 6 weeks and 4 meetings to make. It's already moved. It's already learned. It's already 3 decisions ahead of you, right? And tonight I answer the question sitting under every stalled project you've ever touched. What happens when the thing you built stops waiting for permission, right? The answer doesn't land until we're past the halfway mark, right? So stay with me, right? Yes, you stay with me. Right? Look, final bosses, warriors, smarts, motivators. This is Tech Tuesday, the Declaration, episode 275. And tonight is just me, no Sensei. Sensei is out doing the good Lord's work, right? Listen, this is the signal, and we're going to get straight into it, right? So let's start with the question, man. Let's start with a sentence. that's running this whole entire episode, right? The machine doesn't wait for committee. Sit with that, right? Sit with it, because it's not only about machines, it's about you, right? It's about you. And every stalled launch you've ever watched die had the same disease. Somebody built something good and then walked into a room full of people whose job was to find reasons to slow it down. Not because they were evil, because that's what committees are engineered to do. A committee's real function isn't decision making, it's liability distribution. Nobody in the room wants to be the single name attached to a call that goes already wrong, right? So they spread the risk across enough signatures that no one person owns the outcome, right? That's not leadership. That's institutional self-protection wearing a leadership costume, right? Look, man, you guys know my story. I spent 23 years inside of the Joint Force Headquarters, DOD headquarters in Washington, D.C., right? I watched the machine run, right? I was a branch chief. I know the anatomy of delay before most people know their own household budget, right? A decision that should take an hour would take a week because it had no pass-through, right? It had to go through 3 colonels, 2 civilians, and a review board that met on Thursdays. Not because the decision was hard, because ownership was expensive and nobody wanted to pay it alone, right? Now, compare that to a machine, right? An algorithm doesn't convene. It doesn't circulate a memo for comment. It ingests the data, runs the model, executes, right or wrong, and it moves. And here's the part nobody wants to say out loud, right? And I'm saying it tonight on Tech Tuesdays, right? Right or wrong, right? Moving is usually better than not moving, right? A wrong decision generates information. A stalled decision generates nothing but decay, right? What are my pronouns? A through Z. A through Z are my pronouns, Jared. A through Z, bro. Listen, this is the core of the declaration arc. We didn't open up episode 271 with a request for feedback. We opened with a statement, man. Statements move. Questions wait. Committees are built entirely out of questions. Deferrals. Now let's circle back, right? Let's loop in a stakeholder, right? Let's loop in a stakeholder. Let's say that language is a virus, right? And in that virus, you're going to say you've probably, just imagine you working inside the bureaucracy, right? Inside the government, or you working inside some corporate structure, right? And you've caught this language virus, right? And you've probably spoken it without even noticing, right? And here's your first gut check that happens, right? Think of the last decision you sat on. Not a company decision, but yours, right? A pivot, a person you needed to cut loose, a price you needed to raise, a launch you needed to greenlight. How long did you sit on it, right? Now ask who you were actually waiting on, right? 9 times out of 10, it isn't a real person. It's ghost committee built out of every voice that ever told you to wait your turn, right? The machine has no ghost committee. That's the whole advantage. Building yourself into someone decisive, data-driven, unbothered by imaginary boardrooms isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming fast enough that the code never enters the equation, right? Final bosses, tap in, lock in, right? It's Tech Tuesdays. I'm solo, right? And I'm not going to spend tonight softening this statement and topic, right? This is season 4 of the Rebirth. We're inside Arc 5 of the Declaration, and a declaration by definition doesn't ask your room for its blessing. It states what's already true and dates the world, or dares, I should say, the world to keep up, right? That's the energy that we're going to have for the rest of the show, right? And, I just told you, Big Mike, he's my co-host, but he's doing a mission for suicide prevention for veterans, right? 7,000 miles on a motorcycle, man, which is incredible, man. Shout out to Big Mike, man. He's doing the damn thing. Now, we're going to be hitting verdict after verdict, right? And it's coming straight at you, right? Always, always, always. Look, we're going to build that person, right? The one who moves like the system instead of like the room over a course of the next couple of minutes, right? We're going to be talking about it, man. We're going to strip each other's down layer after layer, right? Because the committees that's sitting in your head replaces it, and we're going to replace it with architecture you can actually use starting tomorrow morning, right? Now let's get into the anatomy, right? Let's get into the anatomy, man. Let's get into the anatomy. Right? Let's dissect this thing proper, right? Because you can't kill what you can't name, right? A committee structurally is a delay mechanism disguised as a safety mechanism. It exists to answer one spoken question, right? Who gets blamed if this goes wrong? Strip it away, the language about stakeholder alignment and cross-functional buy-in, and what's left is a room full of people making sure your name isn't the only name on the failure report, right? I watched this countless of times, right? I watched this for 2 whole decades. A new system rollout, something that should have been straightforward for technical deployment, would require a working group. The working group would require a charter. The charter would require sign-off. And the sign-off comes from 3 directorates, right? Each wanting its own review cycle. And by the time the system deployed, the technology it ran on was already a generation behind. The committee didn't protect the mission. The committee protected careers, and the mission paid the tax, right? The mission paid the tax, right? Now, the mechanism that I was just speaking on, right? The mechanism that I was just speaking on, right? It has 3 moving parts, right? 3. First, diffusion of ownership, right? When 5 people sign off on a decision, no individual carries full weight of it. That feels safer, but it degrades decision quality because nobody is fully accountable. So nobody fully commits their judgment. Second, the consensus seeking, right? Committees optimize for the option everyone can tolerate, not the option that's actually best. You end up with decisions engineered to offend no one, right? Which usually means they inspire no one either, right? Third is the temporal drag, right? Every additional approval layer adds calendar time, and calendar time is the one resource you never recover. A brilliant decision made 6 months ago is 6 months late, right? And it's often worse than a good decision made today. Now, put a machine next to that, right? A fraud detection system flagging a transaction doesn't diffuse ownership across the 5 departments. It has one function: ingest, evaluate, and act, right? It doesn't see consensus among deflecting or conflicting stakeholders. It has an objective function and optimizes toward it, right? It doesn't drag calendar time because it doesn't experience Thursdays as a barrier, right? It doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't, right? So this is exactly why the declaration arc exists, because season 4 has been about rebirth, right? But rebirth without decisiveness is just a slower version of the name we're going to say paralysis wearing a fresh outfit, right? Arc 5 is where the rebirth becomes a mandate. The declaration isn't a suggestion. Isn't a suggestion you float to a committee on your own doubts. It's a statement you make and then build your entire operation around defending it, right? Listen, smarts, I need you to write this down. I need you to write this down before we move on, right? Listen, the committee doesn't announce itself as fear. It announces itself as prudence, thoroughness, right? And let's be smart about this, right? That disguise is exactly why it survived inside you this long undetected, right? Now, let's talk about a cost confession. We always have a cost confession, right? And tonight's cost confession, we're going to talk about it. Real name, real number, real cost, right? And that is mine, right? Because without me using it as I have to use myself an example, right? I have to use myself as what's up, Cam? I see you, bro. Welcome to the show, man. Welcome to the show. It's Tech Tuesdays, man. We talk tech tonight, right? So for years, I sat on a decision about my 23 years, right? And everything under it, right? I envisioned the retirement, right? I envisioned the pension. I was doing the numbers, constantly doing the numbers, right? How can I improve those things, right? And because of it, I have to think, man, and I need you to think on this as well, right? Because there's an actual cost on hesitation, right? Because cost confection only works if the number is real. And every year in that system that I stayed inside a structure, past the point where I knew it didn't serve me or my real purpose, right? I knew what I actually wanted to build, right? And I was paying a tax. We're going to call it the committee tax, right? And here's the number. Let's say 18 months, right? 18 months. That's the length of time between the moment I knew in my gut I was done, right? I was done doing somebody else's mission. I was done and had already started working on my own in the background, right? 18 months of running numbers past a committee that existed only in my head, right? Only in my head. You have a committee in your head too. We was talking about this last night, right? And it made every risk adverse, right? Because the voice, it only got absorbed, right? 18 months where SAT DigiNet could have been up and running. 18 months where Find a Boss podcast could have been 18 months ahead, right? 18 months, man. Listen, that's a long time. That's a year and a half, right? And I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you this because 18 months is the going rate for waiting on a committee that isn't even real, right? Most of you listening tonight, my warriors especially, know exactly what your 18 months look like. Sometimes it looks like a deployment, right? Maybe it's a business you haven't launched. Maybe it's a relationship you haven't ended. Maybe it's a book you haven't finished, right? A certification you haven't even started. Look, a market you haven't entered because you're still waiting for a green light that was never coming from the inside anyway, right? And here's the uncomfortable math, man. Committee doesn't cost you time. They cost you compounding effects. Every day, a book that you're writing or a book that I was writing, right? Using me, right? Sat unfinished was a day of pre-launch momentum that we didn't get to build, right? Every month I spent on the app that I'm developing, right? That was half scoped and wasn't finished. The data landscape kept moving without me, right? Delay isn't neutral. Delay is negative compounding interest charged against your own ambition, right? I paid the cost for those 18 months. And some of you have paid in years. Some of you are still paying right now, right, man? But tonight, mid-payment, look, look, man, mid-payment, we are, and some of you who are listening right now, man, look, we're going to make that call. We're going to make that call that you need to make, right? We need to make that call that you need to make, right? So, look, the machine, look, man, the machine doesn't pay this tax because it has no ghost committee. It has an objective function and a decision loop, right? And it executes the moment the data clears threshold, right? You have a nervous system built by millions of years of social risk aversion, right? And that nervous system will try to convince or convene a meeting every single time you're on the edge of a real decision. But starting tonight, man, starting right now, your job is recognizing that meeting and understanding what that meeting is and why it is, right? It's a cost priced in months, priced in compounding, a compounding effect that you would never get back, right? Motivators, that's the number one thing, right? That I want to stick in your chest walking into tomorrow, right? 18 months gone, a committee that was never real, right? And here's the part I didn't understand until I was already out. The 18 months didn't just cost time, it cost identity. Every month I stayed inside the structure past my own readiness. I was reinforcing a version of myself who waits. That version gets stronger the longer you feed it. Walking away didn't just launch a business, it killed a habit. Right? It killed a habit 23 years deep. And that's the real price tag on hesitation. And it's steeper than any number on any spreadsheet, right? Now, let's get technical. Because that's what we do, man. That's what we do on Tech Tuesdays, right? And this is why Tech Tuesdays is Tech Tuesdays, right? So when people say the machine decides, what's happening under the hood is a decision loop, right? Simple, or I should say more simpler than the mythology around AI that makes it sound cool, right? Data comes in. It gets weighed against the model, a set of learned patterns and explicit rules. The model produces an output, a probability, a classification, and a recommended action. In most operational systems, that output triggers execution without a human in the loop demanding a second opinion, right? Now, you take for instance, algorithmic trading, right? It's a trading system. A trading system doesn't call a board meeting when volatility spikes. It takes thresholds. You cross the threshold, execute the trade, and the advantage of algorithmic systems over human trading desk isn't intelligence, it's latency. The system decides in microseconds what a human committee would still be debating on a Tuesday afternoon meeting. That speed differential is the whole game, right? That's the whole game, man. Look, and this is exactly why Go Time 2, which is dropping this week, is built around, right? There's a principle in there called discipline architecture. You don't build discipline in the moment of temptation or hesitation. You build the architecture ahead of time, so when the moment arrives, the decision is already made and it's been made effectively, right? The machine doesn't deliberate at execution time, and neither should you, right? Neither should you, right? If you've done the work correctly beforehand, neither should you, right? Now, there's another layer to dive in the deeper, right, for a better understanding, right? Machines that learn. Let's talk about it, right? Machines that learn with true adaptive systems update their decision rules over time based on outcomes. That's the feedback loop. A trained algorithm that keeps making bad calls gets retrained. A fraud model that misses too many false negatives gets recalibrated. The machine isn't rigid, it's disciplined, right? Which is different, right? Discipline means you follow the rule until you have evidence it needs updating. Then updating is deliberate, not emotional, right? And definitely not mid-crisis, right? So you compare that to how most people operate, right? Most retaliate every decision emotionally, right? Every single time. And if it's the first time you've ever faced the category of choice, no wonder it takes a week to do what should take an hour. They haven't built the decision rule in advance. They're doing cold analysis under pressure, the worst possible condition to think clearly in, right? You need to build your rules and build them in the calmness. Execute your rules in the storm. That's the machine's actual secret. It's available to every person listening right now, right? No precursor required, right? Look, that's that DigiNet. This isn't a theory. It's how the IT corporation actually has to run, right? You don't build your incident response plan during the incident. You build it in the quiet when your head is clear and the stakes aren't screaming at you. Because by the time a threat lands, the rule already exists. The team isn't deciding what to do. They're executing what was already decided. And that's the entire difference, man. That's the entire difference between an operation that survives and a breach that one gets buried in, right? Or gets buried by it, I should say. Okay. Warriors, you already know this is cold, man. You already know this, right? Standard operating procedures. Why could I say that, man? The SOP. The SOP exists for exactly this reason. Nobody wants a soldier improvising tactics under fire for the first time. The rule gets built and drilled long before it's needed. So the body executes what the mind already settled. Your civilian life deserves that architecture, right? It deserves it. Now, there's one thing the machine has an advantage on, right? And that's pre-built decision rules and clean execution loops, right? The human bottleneck is everything standing between having the rule and pulling the trigger. Now, let's name some, right? Let's name every piece, because you can't dismantle what you won't look at directly, right? And let's start with ego, man. Ego is the first position, right? Committees exist partly because people want their fingerprints on the win and everybody else's fingerprints on the loss, right? That's ego doing risk management on your behalf, and it's slow because ego needs an audience. A machine has no audience. It doesn't care who gets credit. It just executes, right? Fear of being wrong publicly is the second piece, right? This one's brutal and honest. Because most delayed decisions aren't actually about gathering more data. They're about postponing the moment your judgment gets tested in front of other people. I've watched senior leaders sit on obvious calls for weeks, not because they lacked information, but because being worse in private feels survivable, and being wrong in a room full of witnesses feels like death, right? Trust me, I know. I've been there, right? That's not a data problem. That's a nervous system problem wearing a data problem disguise, right? And third, the comfort of the unfinished. As long as the decision is still under review, it doesn't fail yet, right? It's suspended in a box where it's simultaneously a genius move and a disaster at the same time. And nobody has to find out which until the box is open. Some of you keep decisions in that box indefinitely because the box feels safer than either outcome, right? And fourth, outsourced authority, right? This is the ghost committee again, but let's be more specific, right? And be more specific about where it comes from. Because every voice that ever told you, wait until you're sure, every mentor who said, run it by someone first, every institution that trained you to seek a sign off before acting, that's them living in your head for rent free, right? Living in your head rent free, right? And that could be a little bit uncomfortable, right? That could be a little uncomfortable, right? Living in your head rent free, slowing your decisions, right? The committee speed is even it's not even necessary, man, right? But we all do it, right? And believe it or not, when you're able to sit back in the quiet and try to work these problems through, you'll understand that there's really no committee, right? There's no committee, right? It's only you, right? And here's the uncomfortable verdict for that, right? Listen, and I want it to travel and I want it to hit. Every hour you spend waiting for permission you don't structurally need is an hour handed over to a community that only exists inside your skull rent free, right? Rent free. Man, listen. I need you to say that back to yourself, right? I need you to say that back to yourself, right? Look, you are not waiting on your boss. You're not waiting on the market, right? And in most cases, majority of most cases, once you understand the real gatekeepers and have them accounted for, you are waiting on a version of yourself trained by decades of institutions that profited from your hesitation, right? Look, man, 23 years inside a command structure taught me exactly how the training gets installed, right? And it's malicious. Large organizations survive by needing predictable, compliant, patient people. And patience get turned into a virtue regardless of whether the moment calls for it. But patience without discretion isn't a virtue. It's slow obedience, right? The machine was never trained to obey. It was trained to optimize. And tonight, you're being asked to retrain the same way, right? Final bosses, you know this better than anyone, right? And here's the practical test for identifying which bottleneck you're running on right now, right? That's causing your specific hesitation, right? You need to ask yourself what you're actually afraid of in the delayed decision. If the honest answer involves someone else's face, their reaction, their judgment, that's ego or fear of public failure. If the honest answer involves the decision simply staying comfortably unresolved, that's the box. If the answer is a specific voice from your past giving you a rule you never actually agreed to as an adult, that's outsourced authority, right? Name which one is running tonight. You can't dismantle a mechanism you haven't correctly diagnosed. And most people spend years fighting the wrong bottleneck because they never did this 5-second or so audit, right? That's all it takes, man. That's all it takes, right? Now, let's make the case for speed with actual mechanics, right? Not just motivation, because Tech Tuesday demands substance, right? Think about this, right? In competitive systems, where whether it's it's about markets, it's cybersecurity, or entrepreneurship, speed compounds in a way that's easy to underestimate. And here's the mechanism. A fast decision loop means more decision cycles per unit of time. More decision cycles means more data collected from outcomes. More data means faster model refinement. Faster refinement means the gap between you and a slower competitor doesn't stay constant. It widens because you're on your fifth iteration while they're still finishing their first review cycle, right? And this is why in cybersecurity, the systems that win aren't the ones with the most sophisticated single defense. They're the ones with the fastest detection to response loop, right? You already listen, all right? This principle is operational, not theoretical. A threat identified and contained in minutes costs a fraction of what the same threat costs sitting in a queue waiting for a review board to authorize a response. The threat doesn't wait for you or your committee, right? It executes on its own timeline. Your defense has to match that tempo or you're already lost before the meeting was even scheduled, right? And you need to apply that. Apply the same logic to building anything. Every entrepreneur who's out executed a better funded, better staffed competitor did it through decision velocity, not resource advantage. The bigger company has more committees by default, more departments, more stakeholders, more sign-off chains. That's not a strength at scale, it's a structural drag. The solo operator who decides fast, executes, and iterates on real outcomes instead of theoretical risk assessments will outcycle a slower giant 9 times out of 10 in any market where conditions shift faster than the giant's approval process, right? This is exactly the bet behind moving the 23 years of federal structure into full-time ownership of SatDigiNet, right? SatDigiNet is the brand, and not because the federal structure was without value. 23 years of service built the discipline and domain expertise everything now stands on, right? But because the structure that was never going to move at founder speed, and founder speed is the only speed that wins in a market this competitive, right? And you know, to my smarts, this is your strategic edge for this week, right? I need you to count your decision cycle against your closest competitors. Whoever completes more decisions this week isn't just working harder, they're compounding faster. And by next quarter, the gap will look like talent when it was really just tempo, right? When it was really just tempo, right? You need to understand what this is and what this is not, right? It's not about being loud, reckless, or first for the sake of first, right? A fast, wrong decision inside a bad guardrail is still just a fast decision, equal to a fast disaster. What we're describing is fast decisions inside a well-built boundary made by someone who did the evaluation work, right? In advance instead of at the moment of pressure. That distinction is the entire subject of our episode, right? Because speed without structure is just recklessness wearing a confident haircut. And I'm not building that brand for anyone, right? I'm not doing that. Right? Now, let's get responsible, right? Because speed without structure is a declaration. It's recklessness. And I'm not building the brand or I'm not going to do that, right? And let's talk about the actual difference between a guardrail and a committee. Because people conflate these constantly and it's costing them. It's costing you. A committee asks permission before the action. A guardrail constrains the action while it's happening in real time without requiring a pause. And that's the entire distinction, and it changes everything about how fast you can move. Think about it mechanically, right? A fraud detection system doesn't ask a human to approve every single transaction. That would defeat the entire purpose of automation. Instead, it has thresholds built in. Below a certain risk score, auto approve, right? Above a certain risk score, auto decline for flag review. The guardrail is baked into the system architecture, not bolted on as a human approval gate. The system moves at full speed within the boundary, and the boundary itself keeps itself safe. Not a person standing at the door checking IDs one at a time, right? And this is the discipline architecture, right? That's in Go Time 2. In its purest technical form, you don't build a business, a body, a brand, or a bank account by asking permission at every step. You build boundaries in advance, financial thresholds you won't cross, ethical lines you won't compromise, time limits you won't exceed, and then inside those boundaries, you move without hesitation. The guardrail replaces the committee. It gives you all the safety with none of the drag, right? With none of the drags, right? And here's where we get personal, right? We're going to get personal and practical, right? And this is for every warrior and smarts in the room, right? If you're building anything right now, a business, a body transformation, a financial plan, you need to ask yourself, do I have guardrails? A committee sounds like, let me check with my accountant. Let me check with my partner. Let me check my gut, right? Let me sleep on it another week. Or you ask, one of those is a system. The other is an excuse wearing a system's clothing. Now, building real guardrails takes upfront work, right? And I won't pretend otherwise about it, right? You have to actually know your numbers, your risk tolerance, your non-negotiables before the moment the decision arrives, right? And that's the work most people skip. Because building guardrails in the con requires discipline. It's easier to fake discipline in the moment with a committee you can't blame, right? It goes wrong. It all goes wrong, right? I'm building an app right now, right? And this platform is under SatDigiNet, right? And it operates on exactly that same principle in its own development, right? It has legal guardrails, data integrity guardrails, right? All defined up front, so execution inside those lines can move at the pace the mission actually requires. And that's not recklessness. That's architecture doing the job of a committee only a committee pretends to do, right? Except architecture actually works. And here's some homework for tonight, right? And I mean literally, I'm giving you guys homework, right? I need you to pick one domain in your life that's currently running on committee instead of guardrail, right? Write it down, right? Give the actual number, the actual line, the actual limit that should govern it. Not a feeling, an actual number, right? Once the guardrail exists on paper, the committee in that domain is unemployed. It has nothing left to deliberate, right? Because the deliberation already happened, and it happened once in writing in the com, exactly where it belonged, right? That signal page is worth more than a year of meetings you were never going to hold anyway, right? You were never going to hold those meetings. Now, as y'all know, we're in the declaration arc, right? We're in the declaration arc. And because we're in the declaration arc, we have to have a verdict, uncomfortable verdicts, right? And we have to understand that we just moved from the construction into the declaration, right? And let's talk about that, right? Let's talk about moving from the verdict of declaration, or I should say, let's move from verdict to construction, right? Because a declaration without a system behind it is just a good tweet, right? And here's how you build a personal decision loop that operates like the machines, right? Minus the recklessness. Using the same architecture we broke down earlier, right? There's 4 components in it. There's a threshold, there's a rule, there's execution, and there's feedback, right? So let's talk about the threshold first, right? Before you're in the moment of decision, define the specific conditions under which you want to act. Not vague conditions like when I feel ready, right? Feelings aren't thresholds. They're weather, right? Real thresholds are measurable. When I have 3 consistent months of revenue, right? I have I hire, right? When savings hit this figure, I make a move. When the metric crosses the line, I cut the underperforming initiative. A threshold removes the decision from the emotional moment and puts it into the planning moment. When you're clear-headed and not under pressure, right? And then the second rule, right? Because once the threshold is crossed, what's the automatic action? And this is where most people fall apart, right? Right here, because they build the threshold but never commit to the rule that fires when it's across or when it's crossed, right? If revenue hits the number, you hire, full stop. No relitigating in the moment. The rule is your pre-committed decision. You made it in the calm specifically so you wouldn't have to make it in the storm, right? Then, the third execution, right? And this is where you act like a machine, right? No pause for a second opinion, right? You didn't already build that. You already built that, right? No new committee convened at the moment of truth. If you find yourself wanting to add a new approval step at the exact moment your own threshold triggers, that's the ghost committee trying to reassert control. Recognize it and execute anyway, right? Execute anyway, right? And then the fourth, right? The fourth is the feedback, right? After execution, you evaluate the outcome, not relitigate whether you should have acted, but to refine the threshold and rule for the next time, right? This is the machine learning piece translated into human terms, right? You're not supposed to get every threshold right on the first try. You're supposed to build the discipline of adjusting the system based on real outcomes instead of abandoning the entire practice of decisive action the first time a decision doesn't land perfectly, right? Motivators, right? Motivators, right? This is for you specifically, right? A lot of what gets called motivation is really just people trying to manufacture enough emotional energy to override the decision system they never actually built, right? That's exhausting. And it's why motivation alone never sustains anything. You don't need more hype. You need a threshold, a rule, an execution habit, and a feedback loop, right? Hype fades usually by Thursday. Systems don't. You need to build this in with one decision category this week, right? And prove it to yourself that the machine's architecture works in your hands before you scale it across your whole life, right? But I have to give you a warning. Right? Don't build 10 thresholds this week trying to fix your whole life in one setting. All right? You need to have doing that is just building a more sophisticated committee, right? One that requires 10 simultaneous approvals instead of one. You need to pick one, right? Build it clean, let it run. Expand from proof, not from ambition alone. The restraint is itself part of the discipline, and skipping it is how good systems get abandoned by week 3. Buried under their own ambition before they ever got the real chance to prove themselves in actual life, right? Under actual pressure where it counts, where nothing gets easier just because you talked about it one more time, right? Now, this is I'm gonna go over a little bit, right? I'm gonna go over a little bit. So stay with me, right? Stay with me. Stay with me, right? Now, let's bring this all the way down to the individual level, right? We're gonna bring it all the way down to you, right? Because Tech Tuesday isn't just for founders, it's for every person building a life on purpose, right? Final bosses, this segment is built for you specifically. The decision loop architecture we broke down, threshold, rule, execution, feedback, doesn't only apply for business systems. It applies to your body, your relationships, your finances, your discipline. Every domain you've been waiting on a committee that was never actually convened by anyone but you, right? Let's start with physical facility, man, right? It's a go time 2 concept. It's the perfect example of this in practice because most people don't fall at fitness, or I should say fail at fitness because they lack information. You already know what builds strength: consistent training, adequate protein, sufficient recovery. None of that is a mystery in 2026. People fail because they're waiting for a feeling of readiness that operates exactly like a committee. It can always find one more reason to postpone the start date: Monday or after the holidays, right? Or after the stressful month, right? That's not planning, people. That's a ghost committee issuing indefinite continuances on a decision you already made the moment you started thinking about it, right? Then let's talk about financial foundation, right? That runs in the Go Time 2 principles too, right? And it runs the same identical pattern. People sit on investment decisions, debt payoff plans, career moves with clear financial upside because they're waiting for certainty that doesn't exist in financial decisions. There's no version of investing or career switching or business building where all risk gets eliminated before action. The threshold isn't zero risk. The threshold is acceptable. Define risk within a guardrail you've already built. Waiting past that threshold isn't prudence. It's the committee doing its thing again, dressed up as prudence, right? Look, relationships operate the same way. And I'm going to be direct here, right? Because this is what we do in this show, right? We don't do the soft verdicts, right? If you know a relationship, romantic, business, friendship, otherwise, right, and has crashed your threshold for what you're willing to tolerate, and you're still deliberating instead of executing the conversation or the exit, you're not being thoughtful. You are outsourcing your own clarity to a committee made of fear, guilt, and the sunk cost of time already spent, right? And here's the committee call out, right? Straight across all 4 pillars. Warriors, your discipline architecture applies here just as much as it applies to combat readiness. Smarts, your strategies thinking is wasted if it never converts to execution. Motivators, stop manufacturing hype to override decisions you haven't actually built systems for. Final bosses, this entire brand exists because a boss decided wait for the room's permission to be who they already knew they were, right? You don't need a bigger committee. You need a smaller one. Ideally, a committee of 1 operating off thresholds you built in the calm, right? Now, I'm gonna leave. Let's talk about a version of this that I tell myself when I catch my own hesitation creeping in, right? Because it happens. It's gonna always happen, right? 23 years of training doesn't disappear because you finally walked away from the institution that installed it. The question is is simple. If I already know the answer, what exactly am I still reviewing? Most of the time, the honest response is nothing. I already know. I'm just buying myself one more day of not having to stand behind knowing it. One more day of comfort purchased on credit I'll eventually have to repay with interest, plus whatever momentum I lost while the bill was quietly running, right? Now, I owe you, right? I owe you an explanation for the other side of this argument, right? Because the declaration isn't about worshiping machines. It's about learning the one lesson they teach us well and leaving the rest behind. And here's what the machine genuinely cannot do. And this particular thing matters, right? The machine cannot originate meaning. It can optimize toward a objective function, but it cannot decide from absolute nothing, right? That's a particular objective is worth pursuing in the first place, right? That decision, that why, is entirely human, right? The app I'm working on exists because a human being looked at a global space, right? And decided that visibility itself has a moral weight, right? No algorithm generated that motivation. A machine can help build the platform. It cannot conceive the reason the platform needs to exist, right? The machine cannot carry consequence. When an algorithm makes a bad call, there's no algorithm laying awake at 3 a.m. replaying decision, learning something about its own character from the failure. But you can, right? The capacity to actually be changed by consequence, not just statistically updated but morally and psychologically transformed. That is uniquely human, and it's actually a feature, not a limitation. The discomfort you feel before a hard decision isn't always the ghost committee. Sometimes it's your conscience doing legitimate work that no threshold and rule system should override, right? Look, the machine cannot hold legacy. Everything I build, the brand, the podcast, GoTime, SatDigiNet, the app, everything ultimately answers to my kid, right? Whose future is the actual reason any of this matters beyond quarterly numbers, right? A machine optimizes for the objective function it's given. It doesn't carry forward the bloodline's meaning across generations. That's a weight only a human being can choose to carry, and choosing to carry is not the same thing as being showed or slowed down by a committee, right? It's the opposite. It's the fastest, clearest kind of motivation there is because it never wavers the way manufactured hype does, right? So here's the correction to everything we've talked about tonight, right? Look, speed isn't the goal. Speed is the method. The goal is still entirely human, right? Which means legacy, consequence, purpose. The machine teaches us to strip away the fake deliberation, the committee theater, the ghost boardroom convene purely out of fear. It does not and should not teach us to strip away the real deliberation, the conscious level weighing of whether an action serves the legacy you're trying to actually build, right? You need to know the difference between the two. That discernment is the entire skill this episode was based on and that we were building, right? Motivators, here's a test you could run in real time, right? Because fake deliberation feels like avoidance. It makes you smaller, quieter, more likely to check your phone than face the decision. Real conscious feels like weight, not avoidance. It makes you more sober, more focused. It doesn't let you scroll past it. If what you're feeling shrinks you, it's the committee. If what you're feeling sharpens you, it's your character doing exactly what it's supposed to do, right? Learn to tell those two feelings apart, right? And you've just solved most of your decision making for the rest of your life, right? For the rest of your life without needing a single algorithm to do it, right? That's the whole trade this episode has been offering, right? Steal the machine speed. Keep your own soul running the objective function. That's the whole architecture, right? You boil down, and it's boiled down just for you in one sentence you can actually carry with you. Put it in your pocket, put it on your mirror, put it somewhere, right? Put it somewhere. Now, before we close, right? Let's close the loop on what we opened with, right? From the very beginning. Because a declaration doesn't leave questions hanging. It answers them, right? I ask, what happens when the thing you built stops waiting for permission, right? And I didn't give you an answer. Here's the answer in full, right? Now, what happens is this. It moves at the actual speed the mission requires instead of the speed you fear negotiated for, right? It generates real data inside of a hypothetical data system, right? Because execution produces information that deliberation never could. It compounds because every decision cycle it creates the conditions for the next decision cycle to start sooner and forces you, the operator, the founder, the human being behind the system, to build real guardrails instead of relying on a committee to catch your mistakes for you, right? That's harder in the short term. It's the only thing that actually works in the long term, right? And this is the difference between season 3, The Reckoning, and where we stand now in season 4, The Rebirth, arc 5, The Declaration. The Reckoning was about facing what wasn't working, I should say. Necessary work, real work. But reckoning without declaration is just an extended autopsy. You can disguise a problem forever and never actually operate differently because of the diagnosis. The declaration exists because at some point, the diagnosis has to convert into a statement of what you're building next, and then into the guardrails and execution that make that statement true. The machine doesn't wait for committee because the machine was never given a committee to wait for. You were. Every institution you've ever moved through installed one in your head, piece by piece, meeting by meeting, sign off by sign off, until waiting started to feel like wisdom instead of what it actually is most of the time. Cost, denominated in months and years that you can't even get back, right? Tonight's declaration is simple. Name the decision you've been sitting on, not hypothetically, specifically. Build the threshold, commit to the rule, execute it this week, not next quarter, this week, right? Let the feedback teach you what the committee in your head never could, because the committee in your head was never actually trying to teach you anything. It was trying to protect you from a discomfort that in almost every case was smaller than the cost of waiting, right? Look, go time 2, the train has left the station. That's not just a book, or a book title, I should say. That's the operating condition for everyone still listening to the show right now, right? The train left. You're either on it, executing, or you're standing on the platform, still waiting for a committee to approve a ticket that was already in your pocket the whole time. Warriors, smarts, motivators, finder bosses, that ticket has your name on it. It always did. Nobody was ever going to hand you a better one, right? And nobody was ever coming to check in before you boarded. That's what a declaration actually is. Not a hope that permission arrives, a statement that permission was never required in the first place and never will be again. It never will be again, right? Listen, I know you're probably doing whatever you're doing. But I need you to understand and hear this clearly, right? I need you to say the decision. Say it to yourself. Say it out loud, right? Whatever fits the moment. That's the declaration. Everything after this segment closes on, I need you guys to do this and leave nothing behind, right? There's nothing left to decide, right? I told you we're going to go over a little bit, so I'm closing. Here we are, right? Here we are, right? I just gave you the whole premise in one sentence, right? Tonight, we didn't talk about machines because machines are the point. We talked about machines because they're the clearest mirror available for showing you exactly how much of your own hesitation was manufactured by structures that were never actually protecting you, right? They were protecting themselves. 23 years inside a system built that lesson into me the hard way. Building outside that system full time is where I'm putting the lesson to work. And every one of you has the same option in front of you tonight. In whatever domain your own committee has been running the show, right? Warriors, your discipline was never the problem. Your permission seeking was. It's time to redirect it. Smarts, your strategy was never the problem. Your execution gap was. It's time to close it. Motivators, your energy was never the problem. Your system was missing. It's time for you to build it. Final bosses, your capability was never the problem. Your committee was. You need to fire it, right? You need to fire it. And let me leave you with this one piece of information, right? Right? And we're going to let's go back to the brass tacks. Because I don't want tonight to land as a pure intensity with nothing underneath it, right? Everything I've built on this show, SatDigiNet, GoTime, the app, doctoral work I'm doing, all of it moves at the speed it moves because I made a decision a while ago to stop asking rooms full of other people whether my own life made sense. That decision didn't remove the risk. It just made the risk mine to own, honestly, right? Instead of mine to hide inside a committee's slow motion. Own your risk. Stop renting it out to people who were never going to pay it back. And here's the brass tacks again, right? Echoed exactly as I opened the show with, right? Because a declaration doesn't get re-explained. It gets repeated until it's understood. And here it is. The machine doesn't wait for a committee. It waits for a decision. That's the only vote that counts, right? Go time 2. Go time 2. The train has left the station, launches this week, July 9th, right? 6 building blocks: vision clarity, skill supremacy, discipline architecture, discipline capital, financial foundation, physical vitality. That build will give you the exact architecture we talked about tonight in full detail. Go get it, right? Get it. Build your own decision loop in your own hands, right? Right? This is the declaration arc. We start off we have our 5 days a week, right? Motivation Mondays was the activation of this week, right? Activation charge on committee free execution. All the shows are live, right? All shows are live. This has been Tech Tuesdays, episode 75, solo edition, season 4, arc 5, the declaration. I am the final boss, right? I am the final boss. And until then, go make the call you've been waiting on a committee to make for you, right? And one last thing before we go, right? One more last thing, right? Solo episodes hit a little different, right? And I know some of you were waiting on the usual back and forth between me and the Sensei, right? But the declaration arc is going to keep putting me in this chair alone more often than season 4 has, right? Because some verdicts need to land without a second voice softening the edges. Get used to this register. It's not going anywhere, and neither am I, right? 23 years taught me how to wait. This next chapter is teaching me how to declare. And I'd rather build that skill out loud on the mic in front of you, in front of all 4 committees, than do it quietly where nobody can hold me to it, right? Final boss is out, right? I am here. We are here. This is the Final Boss Podcast. And if I don't see you, right? Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Ladies and gentlemen, that is our show. And always remember, there's a heavy pain that comes with discipline. But there's even a heavier pain that comes with regret, right? I am here. We are here. Make sure you go get Go Time 1, and then you go get Go Time 2. The train has left the station, right? Go Time 1, all aboard the fired up train. Go Time 2, the train has left the station. It drops on Thursday. Make sure you go pick it up, man. Make sure you go pick it up, right? Be balanced, be equal, and be smart. That's our show for the evening. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you again tomorrow night. I see you tonight, right? I'll see you tonight at 9 p.m. live for Merger Wednesdays. Until then, y'all have an amazing evening. See you soon.
Welcome to Tech Tuesday on the Final Boss Podcast, where innovation meets attitude, and the future gets decoded one byte at a time. I'm your host, Turbo the CEO, and your co-host, Mike Foth. And today we're diving deep into the tech trenches to uncover the tools, trends, and truths shaping tomorrow. Whether you're a code slinger, gadget geek, or just tech curious, this is your weekly power-up. So grab your controller, plug in, and let's level up.